Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into what is honestly a truly monumental paradigm shift. For the longest time, humanity has been stuck in this very specific, kind of rigid mindset, viewing the world as this giant machine made up of completely isolated mechanical parts. But right now, we're witnessing a massive cultural and scientific shift toward a totally different vision, one of inextricably interconnected wholes. By the end of our time together today, we're going to unpack exactly how this shift seamlessly connects ancient philosophy with the cutting edge of quantum physics, and surprisingly enough, with modern millennial salaries.
Now, you might be wondering, what exactly does the mind of the ancient philosopher Plato have in common with quantum entanglement and modern paychecks? I know, it sounds like the setup to a bizarre riddle, right? But the answer actually reveals a really fundamental governing truth about how our universe and our very society actually operates right beneath the surface. To find that answer, we just need to trace a singular idea across thousands of years of human thought.
Section 1. The Ancient World Soul and Intuition of Interconnectedness.
So, way back, long before modern science was even a thing, early philosophers intuitively grasped something absolutely profound. They realized the universe wasn't just this random collection of dead matter, but a single living entity. They called this concept the anima mundi, or the world soul. It basically posits this deep, intrinsic connection between all living beings, suggesting the cosmos itself is literally infused with life and intelligence. To the Stoics back in the 3rd century BCE, we weren't just isolated, random parts. It was more like we were individual cells functioning inside a massive, highly intelligent body, completely governed by a divine rational principle they called the logos.
Plato actually hit the nail on the head in his famous dialogue Timaeus. He wrote, "This cosmos has verily come into existence as a living creature endowed with soul and reason." What's so amazing about this idea is that thousands of years ago, humanity's default view of the universe was entirely holistic. Plato argued that a divine craftsman constructed the universe according to this beautiful, rational, mathematical pattern. It wasn't seen as a disjointed machine at all. It was a unified, harmonious organism where absolutely everything was perfectly interconnected.
Moving on to Section 2. The limits of reductionism. When breaking things down, breaks down.
Okay, so fast forward from Plato to the scientific revolution, and we see this massive pivot away from that beautiful holistic view. We adopted a much more rigid, mechanistic framework known as reductionism. Now, reductionism, which totally became the backbone of classical physics, assumes you can perfectly understand any complex system just by breaking it down into its smallest, isolated parts. It's like taking apart a pocket watch to see exactly how the gears tick, right? But as we see when we compare this to quantum mechanics, this logic completely falls apart at the subatomic level. In the quantum realm, phenomena like superposition, where particles exist in a blur of multiple possible states all at once, mean that the whole actually defines the parts, not the other way around.
This quantum reality is literally mind-bending, and it completely shatters that old mechanistic worldview. Things like entanglement, superposition, and non-locality definitively prove that local part-based explanations are just fundamentally false. Take non-locality for sure. This is the proven reality that an action happening right here in front of us can have an immediate, instantaneous effect across vast cosmic distances. In this strange world, if you have two entangled particles, measuring one instantly affects the other, even if they're light years apart. They exist as indivisible wholes. You simply cannot reduce them to individual pieces and still understand the system. The whole reductionist playbook, it just gets thrown right out the window.
Which brings us to Section 3. Quantum emergence and holism. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
When we scale up from fundamental quarks at the very bottom, all the way up to complex quantum phenomena at the top, we witness something absolutely incredible. Emergent properties, like superconductivity, where electrical resistance completely disappears, cannot be predicted just by looking at individual quarks or atoms in isolation. It's impossible. At higher levels, collective interactions just dominate the system. This represents a huge scientific paradigm shift toward what researchers call emergence. The system as a whole exhibits novel, irreducible properties. So instead of the microscopic parts dictating the whole is actually determining the reality of its parts.
All right, Section 4, Rules of Systems Thinking, a framework for modern complexity.
So, how does this exact same quantum principle form the foundation of our daily lives? Well, futurist Richard Wilkinson outlines these incredibly useful core principles of systems thinking. Notice that very first one. Everything is connected to everything else. And because of that, you can never do just one thing. Every single action has unintended consequences rippling outward. We also have to remember that the map is not the territory, meaning our rigid models and assumptions are just simplified representations, not the messy, complex reality itself. Dealing with one subsystem in isolation almost always backfires because, as we've seen, all subsystems overlap.
Because of this deep interconnectedness, systems thinking completely changes how we approach solving problems. Instead of just grabbing for a quick band-aid to cover a surface-level symptom, we use a practice called the 5 whys. Basically, you consider the event, and then you peel back a layer to identify the underlying pattern. You ask why that pattern is occurring, and you relentlessly keep asking why until the true integrated root cause emerges. You can't just fix the surface of a complex issue. You really have to understand the entire holistic system that allowed the problem to exist in the first place.
And we can literally scale these systems thinking principles all the way up to the fractal geometry of the cosmic web. Think of fractal geometry as these beautiful, mathematical patterns that perfectly repeat themselves at every single scale, whether you're zooming way in under a powerful microscope or gazing way out through a massive telescope. This elegantly links the holistic, emergent behavior of tiny subatomic particles to the massive, overarching structure of the universe itself. The microcosm and the macrocosm both rely on interconnectedness. The universe is essentially running the exact same holistic playbook at every conceivable scale.
Section 5. Shifting Values and Systems, Applying Holism to the Generational Pay Gap.
But look, we don't just see this intense interconnectedness in the strange realms of quantum physics or cosmic geometry. It directly applies to us. So how on earth do these abstract ideas about holism, emergence, and changing the rules apply to the modern American dream? How do they fundamentally shape the daily lives, the core values, and the actual salaries of millennials in today's workforce? Well, we are right in the middle of a massive generational value shift. Facing systemic issues like relentless wage stagnation and a shifting economy, millennials aren't just playing the old game harder. While boomers and Gen X largely maintained a high focus on big income and traditional financial success, millennials are doing something entirely different. They're downshifting. They're moving away from pure financial success toward personal goals, emotional connections, and frugality. They're basically viewing their lives as an integrated, complex system where mental health, community, and purpose matter just as much as a paycheck, rather than reducing their existence to one isolated financial metric. There's this brilliant quote from Charlotte Roberts that perfectly captures a key principle of systems thinking here. She says, "Don't try to control the players, just change the rules." If an outdated economic system tries to force choices onto people, those people will naturally try to outwit the system. It is much more effective, and honestly far more powerful, to simply change the rules of the game so that it benefits the whole. By redefining the American dream to prioritize emotional connections and personal values over sheer wealth, millennials are actively changing the rules of the economic system they inherited. This isn't just a temporary reaction to a tough economy either. Futurists note it's a significant value shift that isn't likely to reverse. Just like entangled quantum particles completely refuse to act as isolated, predictable pieces of a machine, human beings are refusing to act as isolated cogs in an economic engine. They are demanding a holistic approach, redefining the entire system from the ground up. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought. If the universe, from the mind-bending quantum realm all the way to the very fabric of human society, is truly driven by interconnected wholes rather than isolated, mechanical parts, what rigid rules in your own complex system will you redefine today?